as for the very final COP meeting or Community of Practice meeting for 2025, I'm discussing the actual application process of applying for a PhD. I've entitled it From Practitioner to Researcher, a guide to PhD applications in counselling. I'm going to be talking, I've got an agenda here, so I might just go to the next slide. So for the next 50 minutes, I'm going to talk about really briefly the PhD. What is it? I know we did that 2 months ago on all the different, or the three main types of PhDs. So if you're interested in what is a PhD, that's the best recording to watch. Then I'm going to talk about step one. First of all, assessing your eligibility. Step two, bridging the gap. If you decide, or if you, in your assessments, you decide that you might not yet be eligible, how do you bridge that gap? Step three, the application itself, including the important timeline. Then step four, talking about funding your PhD. And finally, the final application and key takeaways. And I've certainly summarised this in a PDF that I'll share with you at the end of this hour. If I forget to do so, please someone remind me to do so, and I'll attach it in the chats. Everybody happy with that agenda? Yeah, cool. I'm just going to move this up here. Good, excellent. All right, let's move on now. So, part one, what is a research PhD? So if you recall back the last COP meeting that we did, where we talked about three different types of PhDs, the generalist PhD, the more industry-focused PhD, and then that more creatively focused PhD. This is today's talk is applicable to all, but I'm just I'm just going to use as for examples the generalist PhD, okay? But it is applicable to all. There's no separate way. Yeah. All right. As you know, I suppose maybe not. Do you understand it when I mean AQF level 10? Does everybody understand what that means? If not, yeah, cool. So it is the highest recognised academic qualification here in Australia, which is AQF 10. There's no higher. And 10 very much has those attributes of creativity and originality of thought, etc. And so that's what a PhD is all about, as you know, being researching an original research question and filling a known gap in your field of research. The purpose of a PhD, though, it is not at all an advanced clinical training degree. That definition is held for the masters of whatever area you're in this case, counselling. A PhD is actually to train you more to be an independent researcher, full stop, not in any particular profession, but rather the skills learned as to be an independent researcher in a PhD is understood to be applicable to any profession. So consequently, generally speaking, if you're in a HDR program in a university, you would be enrolled as a student with other students from many other disciplines. But you're all going through the same program. That is the HDR program, otherwise known as the Higher Degree of Research program. The product of a PhD is a substantial thesis. Generally speaking, 80,000 words, and I say generally, so look at your university of your interest, but on average, it's around 80,000 words. And that 80,000 words has to be assessed as contributing, making an original contribution to knowledge in your field. All right. As we've also discussed, the product can either be one final big thesis at the end of your journey, or it can be the result of a series of publications as you go. Universities tend to favour the latter. because by the time you graduate, you've already got a number of high quality publications on your resume that you can that evidences your ability to do the job when you apply for jobs after your PhD, which are generally and again I'm talking generalist PhD, the aim is generally to be able to enter academia within your discipline. All right. So the key concept in Australia, the model of PhD is not like coursework. It's very much a supervisor-led model. So, in other words, you don't enroll in courses and do the program by a series of courses, which is typical of a bachelor or master's. Instead, you are guided or mentored through the 3 years on an independent piece of research. Yeah. And again, you don't just apply to the university. You apply to work with a specific academic that you've found, and your application will be rejected if you haven't got a supervisor's name on that application and evidence that that supervisor has agreed to supervise you. All right, so and I will go through this later, but yeah, one of the first steps of an application is finding a suitable academic who's willing to supervise you on your journey. All right, so any questions on that so far, what I've said? No, all right. Okay, so part 2, step 1, assessing your eligibility. So basically, any admissions committee is always going to be looking at one thing, you demonstrating your proven research capacity. So your huge and 20 or 30 years of clinical experience is a huge asset, certainly to the topic of discussion or the topic that you're going to research. But that years and years and years of clinical experience is not a substitute for formal research training in the eyes of an admissions board. So to be eligible for direct entry, you must have one of the following. All right. So the gold standard. First up, the first pathway is a bachelor's degree with an honours tacked on at the end. That's the standard. And if we remember the talk we did a couple of months ago, that's that starting off in the 20s, and you generally have that problems like imposter syndrome and all that. So, but that is generally the pathway, bachelor's degree plus honours and a certain grade in that honours. And that is the direct pathway straight to a PhD. So the critical filter here, though, is the grade that you get in your honours year. You must at least have a first class honours, H1, or at least an upper second class, H2A honours. H2Bs and below are not eligible to go on to a PhD. So this basically translates into your thesis at the end of the honours has been assessed as around the credit distinction area, therefore demonstrating your attainment of those research competencies, and that's the direct pathway into a PhD. All right, so hey, yeah, so me, for example, the master's degree. All right. This is the path mostly for those who have been out there being the practitioner and now they want to come back. They've got a master's degree already, they've been working, and now they want to go further in their career. There is a catch, though, in this space, and I have highlighted this one for you before. A standard coursework Master of Counselling that's written strictly to comply with the PACFA and ACA accreditation standards is actually in itself insufficient, because up until now, the training standards are very much accredited programs are designed to create the practitioner, not necessarily the researcher. Generally speaking, you had to be aware of the need for a research component and then find a coursework master's program that did include a significant research component. But they weren't necessarily, up until now, needed to be accredited as a Master's of Counselling. Generally speaking, if you're going into a master's and you want to find one with a research component, consider the 25% rule. So at least universities, a quarter of the program, which translates to about 3 or 4 courses, are dedicated to learning research competencies, research skills, and actually doing a little research project. If you've done a master's degree with a significant research component, that is another pathway B into the HDR. Again, well, it says here you need a high grade, again, 75% plus in that research component, but I've known universities just to be happy with you having done a research component, and the grade itself hasn't been considered. So that again is typical of you consider the university you're studying so far, or you're going to apply to. So far, so good. Any questions on that? Oh. All right. What about C? What if you have a coursework master's and it's completely coursework and there was not a significant research component in there? This is the toughest pathway. Equivalent experience, as it says, does not mean 10 years of clinical experience. What it means is concrete research outputs. So, for example, in your years as a practitioner, you have reached out to academics and made sure that you have been publishing despite not having a PhD and doing it as a practitioner. So maybe during your practitioner years, you have been a first author, you have had a publication in a peer-reviewed academic journal, and hopefully a high-ranked one, and you're the first author, and you're a named investigator on a competitively funded research grant. There's some evidence that you'd need to accumulate as a practitioner to show the assessor board when you're ready to apply to do a PhD if you didn't have a research component in your master's. All right, so generally what they're looking for is evidence that you have a research competency and research skills. All right, so far? And as it says, this is the hardest pathway and the toughest pathway. All right. So in terms, in a summary, I suppose, of what I've been mentioning so far, you'll be asking yourself here, do I have a bachelor with an honours tack on? And is it at least a H2A result? If not, did my master's include a thesis worth at least 25% of my degree? And if not, have I published peer-reviewed research as a lead author during my practitioner years? If you answered no to all of these three, and you are probably like most practitioners, this is actually normal and expected, and there are solutions, and that's what I want to talk about next. So let's talk about the formal bridging program to help you jump from a coursework master's to a PhD without having any publications under your belt to date. All right. Part 3, step 2, bridging that gap. If you don't meet the direct entry requirements we've just highlighted, universities do have formal on-ramps to get you research ready. These programs are designed to teach you the exact research skills and the blueprint needed to succeed in a PhD. And the two main options for a counselling practitioner are doing a Master's of Philosophy or enrolling in a graduate diploma of research studies. So both of them are, again, will teach you the research skills, their coursework, They'll teach you the research skills, and they are pathways into a PhD. Okay, so let's look at the pathway 1, Masters of Philosophy. So this is an internationally recognized graduate research degree. It's generally 1.5 to 2 years, and in there you are supervised with your own supervisor in your own chosen research project. Consider it like doing a mini PhD. Many master, we call them MPhils, many MPhil students who do perform well when they've done about 12 to 18 months of their MPhil, if they've done really well, they actually can apply to transfer over to the PhD, and therefore they upgrade their MPhil to the PhD. So then all the work you've done in the MPhil up to that point becomes your first year of your PhD. So this is best for the practitioner who wants a standalone research qualification as well as test the waters of a large project. Make sense so far? Yep. All right, let's look at pathway 2. The Graduate Diploma of Research Studies. This is a 1-year full-time or a 2-year part-time program, and it is explicitly designed as a pathway to a PhD or MPhil, if that's the way a person wants to go, for applicants who do not possess the required qualifications. And it definitely includes all the needed coursework on all your research methods, etc., and a preliminary thesis so that you can, put into practice what you're learning as you go. You would enroll in a stream like the Graduate Diploma of Health Research that are offered at various universities, and this is best for the practitioner who is 100% certain they want a PhD and they need the fastest and most direct on-ramp. All right. All right, so any questions on those 2 pathways, which are part of the bridging from a coursework master's to a PhD? No.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please, Elise. Yeah.
I heard you say with Bridging Pathway 1, that could essentially be used as your first year towards PhD.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
The grad, is that the same, or that's completely separate? That's a on-ramp, and then you start the PhD.
Exactly. You've definitely understood that absolutely correctly, Elise. Yeah, the grad dip is a pathway and not a first year of your PhD. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. All right. All right, let's move on to the application. Now that you understand, I suppose, your eligibility, the need to demonstrate your research competency, and what you do if you need to do a bridging program. We talked about the 2 bridging pathways. I want to now talk about the actual application. You've assessed yourself. You know you're either have the research competency to apply, or now you've done one of those 2 bridging pathways and now you're ready to apply. So let's talk about the strategic application. All right, so you're eligible. You're either directly or via a bridging path, and this is the most important part of tonight's presentation. A PhD application is actually not a one-time event. It's actually a multi-stage 6-month and maybe 8-month strategic process. And it has 3 phases that must be done in this order. All right. First of all, the first phase is find a supervisor. Research academics, what you do is, and I'll go into these in more depth, your goal is to research academics at your local university and identify an expert whose published works are aligned with your personal interests. Once you've found that supervisor or /supervisors, you make contact with them and propose to be studying under them. You email your supervisor with a very formal introduction, and I will go into what that email looks like, your CV, and a preliminary research proposal to them. And then if successful, you get invited. So if your supervisor agrees in principle, you submit a formal expression of interest, which includes their names on them. Only after the EOI is approved are you actually invited to submit your final application. So let's go to step 1, finding your supervisor. So you find an academic, as I said, whose research aligns with your interests. You find them, generally university websites will list all the practitioners or all the academics at that university, and you can filter them according to area of interest. So that can help you find an expert. But also read the staff pages, go into the School of Psychology or the School of Counselling or wherever, and read the biographies of all the staff listed there. What you're checking for in their profile, generally speaking, it should mention on the website that they're available for supervision, and do very much once you've got 1 or 2 names you're interested in, go and read their most recent publications. Become very familiar with what they're publishing. Don't pitch, for example, don't pitch a CBT study to a purely psychoanalytically focused practitioner. All right, so do become very familiar with their language, their research interests, so you can align your initial contact with their interest area. You will definitely, your email will be read if you've demonstrated that. All right, so that's finding a supervisor. Let's assume you've found 1 or 2 and you're going to make it the first contact email. This slide talks about the do's of that cover letter. Do use a clear subject line, such as prospective PhD study inquiry. Address them formally, dear Dr. Smith, for example, and explain why you have chosen them specifically. This is where the reading comes in. I have read your 2024 paper on, and then continue on. And my research idea builds on this by, so really make it very specific. Briefly state your qualifications or that are aligned to your research readiness. For example, I have a H2A honours degree. And then state your funding intent. Most of you will say, I will be applying for the domestic RTP scholarship, which is usual for anybody who's domestic applying for a HDR program in a public university. Always attach your academic CV and a 1 to 2 page preliminary research proposal. Although it doesn't mention here, when I get emails, if they don't attach a proposal or a CV, I'm not interested. I really want to see their style of writing, because that has a lot to do with their readiness to actually prepare manuscripts, etc. Does that make sense so far? Yep. All right. All right, so making first contact. Don't, and I've had this experience too, don't send a generic copy-pasted email to 20 professors. I believe you me, it's a small world, and we tend to talk. Did you get an email from? And we all know who we're talking about, so it does happen, and they're not taken seriously. Don't ask any vague question like, are you accepting students, and things like that. And don't make an unsolicited phone call. Email is the standard. Don't badger them. Please be patient. Academics are busy. Wait 1 to 2 weeks for a reply before sending 1 polite follow-up. Critical timing. Contact supervisors at least 8 to 12 weeks before any scholarship deadlines. All right. So be aware of the scholarship deadlines. Make sure you're contacting supervisors at least 3 months before to give yourself time to write the EOI, etc., and get the application in. All right. Any questions on the? Okay. Wonderful. All right. The preliminary research proposal. This is that discussion document that proves you have research thinking. It's not a binding contract. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers and all the research methodologies and the whole PhD plan set out right now. You don't at all. This proposal, it's a starting point. It's your beginning thinking. We understand that when we as supervisors come on board, things may change and change quite significantly. But it's important to have at least those forming thoughts and that you've put them down into some sort of order to demonstrate also your writing. So do understand that this 1 to 2 page proposal is only a starting point. It says there may well change. It will change substantially as you progress. All right. It's to show that you have indeed identified a significant problem or gap, your enthusiasm in filling that gap, and that you do have an idea of a possible plan to investigate in, but we know as supervisors that that's an area that will be built and developed and molded as we work together over the next 12 months if your application's approved. So that's the whole idea of those 1 to 2 points. It's simply a blueprint. It's a starting point. It certainly will be built on. All right. And it's written like a proper literature review. And it's not just a brain dump, a thought dump, a thinking dump. It's not that at all. There is order to your writing, etc. All right, let me go to a page which gives you the key components of a research proposal. A good 1 to 2 page proposal follows this structure. It has a title, which is a clear, descriptive working title. It starts with an introduction and background. So the hook, so to speak, the paragraph that hooks in the reader. What is the problem? Why is this a problem? Why is it so important to address? And then you're going to go into the literature review as a result of your initial reading of what is being published out there in this area and your summarizing of what we currently know, leading to the gap. So the literature review will definitely summarize what we do know in the area, but significantly also mention what don't we know, otherwise known as the gap, the knowledge gap that needs to be filled. This will be followed with with 1 or 2 research aims and questions that are asked to fill that gap that you've identified. This study aims to, for example, you may or may not be able to do the methodology bit, but give it a go. You'll probably have somewhat of an idea of qualitative versus quantitative. But again, this will actually be molded. So you might mention that this research question is best studied using qualitative methodology, and you're interested in, and you think maybe semi-structured interviews with 15 counsellors might be the best way to answer some predetermined questions. And then if you can, you may not be able to, you might even mention there how you might analyze the eventual data. But knowing that it's preliminary and all you're doing is really demonstrating your knowledge in this area. Then you'll talk about the significance and the contribution. Why does answering or filling this gap matter? What original contribution will it make? Answer that both in regards to what contribution will it make to the counsellor practitioner in the future who reads your paper, as well as perhaps maybe other research questions that you may anticipate being formed from your findings that future research may engage in down the track. Not necessary, but certainly those sorts of points. And then obviously you include your short list of references that you've referred to populate your research proposal. I'm sure you're familiar with all of that sort of stuff, given that if you're honours or at least masters, you're very aware of what a literature review is, etc. And being mindful too, there is AI tools out there that can help you in this space. Yeah, and that's more to say about that. There's lots of PD on how emerging AI tools can help you in the research space. All right, all questions at all in that? No. All right. So you've found a supervisor, you've sent them an email with including your academic CV and your research proposal. You've written a formal email, and your chosen supervisor has replied, "This looks promising. I am willing to support your application." Yay. Keeping in mind, you probably got that answer because your area is closely aligned with his or hers, and that they can see that you doing a PhD with them will also boost their research profile. It's very much a symbiotic relationship. So you will get a lot of benefit from that supervisor, but the supervisor also sees value in supervising you because you're furthering their own research career. So hence the importance of finding someone aligned with your research area. So what's next? You'll be invited to lodge a formal expression of interest. This is a mandatory online pre-application used by most Australian universities. And in it, you will be asked to upload your proposal and transcripts. I think that means transcripts of anybody that's a referee of your research prowess. In that EOI, you also formally name the supervisor who's agreed to supervise with you, and you attach the evidence of supervisor support, such as the email chain. This is not instant. It actually can take 6 to 8 weeks for the EOI to be formally approved because they get a lot, and they usually have certain meetings a year and consider them all at the next EO meeting. So your application might have been just after the last meeting, so you have to wait to the next meeting to hear your answer. All right, so it's not immediate. So that's the EOI. And then I want to give you a bit of a timeline here. So just pretend your EOI is due around September sometime. So around June, you've started researching supervisors and you've read their work. So by August, perhaps, you've found a supervisor and you're sending your first contact email and your preliminary proposal to your chosen supervisors, knowing that they're not good. You might not hear from them, or if you do, it might be 2 weeks or more. So by September, hopefully you've heard from them. If not, you've given them a follow-up email or you've had virtual meetings. You may be in that virtual meeting, there's some interest and your supervisor has possibly asked you to refine your proposal. So it's ready for the EOI. So by the time October comes, you've submitted your EOI, and maybe by at the end of October, it's finally approved and you've received a formal invitation to apply. So, and it's due at the end of October. So by October 31, you've submitted your final formal application, but you've actually started back at the early June. So it's important really to consider the timeline. It's not an immediate process. All right, makes sense so far? Yep. All right, let's move on. Funding. How do you pay if you're going to be a full-time PhD student? How the hell do you pay? Which is a big question, particularly for those who are embarking on a PhD after doing a career in the field and want to return. You do have under your belt the Australian Government Research Training Program, otherwise known as the RTP. This is the primary funding model for domestic PhD students. It's not a scholarship. No, sorry, it's not a loan. It's a scholarship. You do not have to pay this back. This RTP, there's a number of, I think I've got this on the next slide, the RTP. It's funding the government gives universities. You don't actually apply for it. The universities get it, and that dictates how many places at that university that the university has to accept PhDs applications for that year. There's two main parts to it. The fee offset. In other words, the government will pay your fee to do your PhD. It's 100% of your tuition fees for up to 4 years. If your PhD extends beyond the 4 years, and this is full-time equivalent, then you start paying the rest of the years. So this means your PhD is, I suppose, free to you, but really the government's paying. Now, some universities also include, I'm not too clear on this one, but I think applicants who can demonstrate their research readiness. They've probably done a bachelor with honours and they've got class 1 honours, or they've demonstrated research prowess, or definite unquestionable research competencies. They probably will also attract an RTP stipend, which is a tax-free living allowance paid to you fortnightly up to, at the moment, 34 to 39,000 per year. Okay, but not every applicant gets that. I'm not too sure what the cutoff is to be considered for an RTP stipend. The stipend lasts from 3 to 3.5 years. All right. So the important thing here is you don't apply for it. It's your application to do a PhD is included in your application to get to the RTP. It's all included in your application. It's an automatic application. All right. How to apply for an RTP scholarship? Well, I've just answered that. It's not something that you apply for. You do not apply to the government. You apply directly to the university, and at most universities, your application for admission is also your application for scholarship. You are automatically considered based on the merit of your application, and it is a competitive ranking process. Obviously, applicants with H1, so in other words, honours class 1 or above, are often prioritised for the stipend. I suppose I'm answering my question there. For the stipend. If you don't get a stipend, though, there's still likelihood that, well, here it is. If you apply and you're accepted, you will get your fees covered by the government. You just might not get the stipend if you're not one of those the highest H1 sort of applicants. All right, I hope I'm making sense. Yeah. So it's, yeah. All right, the scholarship round, there are critical deadlines. While you can apply for your HTR anytime, You can only apply for the funding during specific competitive rounds. The main round for a semester 1 start, the application deadline is usually August to October of the previous year. So in other words, if a HDR student wants to apply January 26, they've missed out on getting an RTB stipend for 2026. So yeah. So for example, ANU's RTP deadline was October 31st, Monash's was October 31st, and UQ's was September, October. As they've published on their website. So the takeaway is do plan 6 to 8 months in advance, so your application does include that RTP application as well. Makes sense? All right. So it's generally around October that you need of the year before for the year you want to start studying. Yeah. All right. Okay. The final application. So you're at the final hurdle. You've been invited to apply. In your application, please be meticulous, and this application will be done in concert with your supervisor. Do be meticulous. This is typical of research. Attention to detail. If there's any documents missing, it will be returned to you or rejected. So your master checklist includes that final research proposal that you've been working on with your supervisor, the evidence of supervisor support, such as your EOI approval, your academic CV, your official academic transcripts from all your tertiary studies, including your clinical coursework sort of studies, ongoing grading scales, often on the back of your transcripts. Okay, so so besides the document that says you're awarded the Master of Counselling, you also get pages that show all the grades who you got for all the courses you did in that Master's. So do include that, your grade, your transcripts. Obviously your testament at the end, the piece of paper that you frame and is on your wall, that's got to be included. And then referee reports. Generally, your supervisor will give you the uni-specific forms for you to use, and to circulate to preferred referees to provide support for your suitability to be a PhD student. And then proof of identity, either a driver's license, birth certificate, or a passport. All right, so that's your master checklist in the application. Now, so I want to just give you the key takeaways of tonight's talk. So the application is going to prioritize your research competency. It's not interested in your 20 years of practice. So it's a research award. Admission assesses your proven research capacity, as we talked about, either honours up to at least H2A, or your master's coursework has at least 25% in there. If not, then you're looking at your evidence of doing some sort of bridging pathway, either MPhil or the grad dip of research. Do keep in mind that it's not an immediate process. Takes 6 to 8 months to apply for a HDR program. And the first part is finding that supervisor. And that happens 8 months before you actually want to apply. And this is all before October if you want to be considered for that RTP scholarship round. All right. Be meticulous. Your final application is an administrative test. Don't fail on it by missing for something like the transcripts of all your courses and their grades in your application. All right. So that's all I have had prepared for. So we've actually got a beautiful 9 minutes left for any questions. And hopefully, or any clarifications. So I might stop sharing so we can look at each other. Yeah, so hopefully that answered some of your questions. Yeah, and hopefully instigated some more. How can I help?
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
What constitutes research work as a part of your master's, for example?
Yep.
So, does that mean that you're working on one particular thesis that takes up 25%? Or does it mean that you're doing research work in individual units within that master's?
Yeah. Very, very good question. In a coursework master's, the 25%, I've seen a number of different models. Such, for example, I've seen course the 25% make up of 25% be made up of one course that is a teaching course, a course where you get classes each week, and the content is what is qualitative, what is quantitative, what are the different types of research designs, what is the different types of data collection. So really going into the content of research. And then the other two or three courses are very much doing the research alongside a supervisor that's been assigned to you. Now, that in a master's program, the supervisor's probably been allocated 4 or 5 students. So and it's up to that supervisor how the supervision goes on. It could be group supervision, so that you meet on a regular basis, and as a group of students, you're keeping up with each other in regards to what your the progression of your research. Or other supervisors prefer to do 4 or 5 individual supervision through, on a regular basis. So instead of doing it by group, so that their supervision can be more individual. So yeah, 1 or 2 coursework where you're actually taught the research, not as comprehensive as you would get if you did an honours year or a grad dip in research, but nonetheless there. And then the other courses are very much applying that coursework to your particular research project, with the support of your research supervisor, resulting in a capstone project, which is likely 5, 6, maybe 7,000 words, generally called a journal manuscript, which like a report, a clinical report, that's getting close to submitting to a journal for publication. So not a 10,000 thesis or 80,000 word, but rather something around the 5 to 7,000 word document, which is a capstone. Does that answer your question, Javier?
Yeah, it does. I don't think my coursework did that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm more than happy to talk to you about what your coursework did do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
Absolutely.
offline or at a later date. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. No problem. Yeah. All right. Cheryl.
My question is around choosing a supervisor.
Yeah.
Um, because sometimes, depending on the research that you're going to do, it's hard to find a supervisor within that university where you want to study. So, in that case, what's your thinking around finding supervisor across university?
All right. Number of answers to that one. So your question is, I've got a topic, I've got a local university, but there's no academic in there that's a nice fit for my research. Yeah. So you've got 2 options. The option is increase your search to universities where that may universities that have academics that are closer to your topic, and the supervisor is willing to supervise you across the waves using Zoom. An example is I have a HDR student who works and lives in Sydney. She's very capable. She doesn't need to be on campus and see me. It's not compromising her progression by us meeting on Zoom. It's actually probably preferred a lot. It's just easier sometimes to supervise on Zoom. So you can do online supervision. You can do a HDR program online, is what I'm saying. So maybe broaden your search to other universities, and then you will in your application talk about where you are and that your preference is online, doing the HDR program online. Yeah. In that case, do make an effort at least to see your supervisor in person. Visit your host university at least once a year, at least, to engage in they like the HDR students to get together and get to know each other, collaborate, and build skills together. So at least submit, or prompt, what's the word? At least commit at least once a year at your host university. The second part is, okay, you've done that and there's still no supervisor out there that is not interested in your area. May I suggest to you that maybe that means that your particular area that you want to research is postdoctoral, and maybe do your PhD in an area that's one step below what you really want to do, and then find a supervisor, because indeed the PhD in itself is the training ground to become that doctor of research, so that you can eventually do the research of your passion. So that sometimes is and that is common. When you found a supervisor, they will talk to you about scope, etc. Absolutely, and making sure your end product, the dissertation, is within scope. Okay, so sometimes a HDR's supervisor's role is to make the actual project realistic. It's actually more common to bring a student's goals inward, bring them to scope by reducing the load. It's less common to say you're not doing enough. All right, does that make sense, Cheryl? Yeah. So I do want to say to you, be prepared to possibly have to study something that's not quite in your area. All right, but at least it's the doorway to get to your area eventually. And once you're an academic, you can research on whatever you want, because you've got doctor in front of your name, and you've demonstrated your research prowess, and off you go. The world's your oyster. Yeah, absolutely. I hope you liked my answer, Cheryl.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. And I